Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic, and if enjoying this then please share and like part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto was having a really bad day. To start with, today was October 10th, a day when people seemed to hate him the most. Usually, he'd be chased whenever he ventured out of his apartment, and often he was even beaten by drunken villagers. This year, he'd decided to stay inside until it was over, but that didn't help. They simply came looking for him. He shuddered, as he heard them coming up the stairs. By the sound of their steps, some of them were shinobi. This was bad, very bad. If it were only villagers, the most they could do was beat on him. Ninja, however, fearing for his life, Naruto jumped out of his window, desperate to escape the mob he knew would be breaking down his door soon. He saw the smoke rising from his apartment, as he ran through the crowd, desperate to put any distance he could between him and his pursuers. Huffing, he slowed to a stop in front of a small restaurant, specializing in dango. There was only one person there, a woman who looked to be somewhere around 18. She wore a tan trenchcoat, a tan miniskirt, and when she turned to face him, he could see that her shirt was made of fishnet. She smiled at the goofy-looking boy, and tentatively, he smiled in return. Suddenly, he heard the sound of an angry mob catching up to him. He ran, and on her stool, Anko growled. Naruto ran as fast as his short legs could carry him, right into a dead end. The mob advanced slowly, and he could see that many of them were chunin. He trembled in fear, seeing the murder in their eyes. He could tell that most of them were drunk. It would take a miracle to save him now. Almost as soon as the thought crossed his mind, a tan blur leapt over the mob, landing in front of him, a kunai at the ready in her hand. One of the leaders of the mob, a special jonin, demanded, "Get out of our way, snake bitch. We're gonna give the demon what's coming to him." She hissed, and several large snakes erupted from her sleeve, binding the man and dragging him towards her, until their noses were almost touching. "You wanna say that again, punk?" The terrified man turned white, and fainted. She tossed him aside, and, with her other hand, she lit a flare. 5. 4. The mob began running away as they heard this, but they were blocked by a wall of mud. 1. A man was standing on the wall, an Anbu with the codename of Hound. His spiky silver hair stuck out from under his Anbu mask. Several of his fellow Anbu joined him on the wall, and they began arresting all who were there. Naruto clung to the back of Anko's leg, trembling, and she attempted to comfort the boy, picking him up, and holding him in her arms. She didn't know much about little kids, but it seemed to work with other parents. Her eyes widened as she considered that idea. Parenthood. She felt for the kid, she really did, but adoption. She wasn't sure she was ready to be anyone's mother. She looked down to Naruto, a small smile on her face. "Hey kid, mind telling me where you live?" He shook his head sadly. "Bad people burned it. Had the Anbu not been taking away the last of the villagers, she would have gladly set her snakes on them. How could they do this? Were they really that stupid?" She sighed. "Tell ya what kid, how about we go see the Hokage? I'm sure he'll want to hear about this." Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office, Sarutobi had chosen that moment to check on Naruto with his crystal ball. He smiled as he saw Anko holding the boy protectively. Perhaps now that she's seen what the boy has been going through, she'll consider. He chuckled. "I must admit, it's hard to imagine Anko as a mother. But I have a feeling she'll take to the boy, especially considering how similar their backgrounds are." 5 minutes later, Anko walked into the third's office, with the blonde 4-year-old on her back, asleep. She looked nervous, but determined, as if she'd come to a decision on the way there, which, thanks to his crystal ball, he knew she probably had. "Hokage-sama, I would like to request an adoption form for Uzumaki Naruto." He smiled at her. "I'm sorry, Anko, but I cannot allow you to adopt him as Naruto Mitarashi." "But why? Surely you don't see him like that, do you?" He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Calm down, Anko. I said that he could not become Naruto Mitarashi. I never. He sighed. It has nothing to do with you. What I am about to tell you was originally intended to be a secret until the boy came of age, but, seeing as he has a guardian now, I believe that it is all right to reveal this. She nodded, though she was still confused. She already knew about the demon sealed within him, what more could there be? As his future guardian, you have the right to know. That Uzumaki was his mother's maiden name. His father's name was kept a secret, because there are many relatives of those he'd in the last war who would gladly take their revenge on little Naruto. His real father was Minato Namikaze, my successor. Anko's eyes widened. Well, that explains a lot. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. How so? She removed the blonde from her back, and cradled him in her arms. It always kinda bothered me when I thought about it, why this particular child? Mix that with his incredible resemblance to the fourth and it seems painfully obvious. He smiled. We probably wouldn't have been able to keep this secret for long, anyway. This village is filled with shinobi, after all, even though most of them are blinded by their hatred for the boy. Someone would have figured it out eventually. I am only glad that he has found someone such as you. She smiled, blushing faintly at his praise. She'd always liked the old man, he'd been the one protecting her, when she finally managed to escape from the snake bastard. He smiled in return. Mitarashi Anko, are you willing to become Namikaze Anko, for Naruto's sake? She frowned. Is that even legal? Sarutobi chuckled. The last remaining member of a clan is automatically clan head, and thus has the right to accept into the clan anyone he or she deems worthy. In short, so long as Naruto says yes, it's legal. She gently shook the boy awake. Hey, kid. He smiled. He said, hi, nice lady. She chuckled. My name is Anko. He grinned. Mine's Naruto. He looked over to the Hokage. Hey, Oji-san, what are you doing here? Where is here? Sarutobi chuckled. You're in my office, Naruto. His eyes widened. Oh yeah, I was running, and there were some angry people were chasing me, and Anko-chan saved me. She was so cool. She smiled. Thanks kid, but the Anbu took care of most of it. He grinned. You're still the coolest, Anko-chan. She surprised both of them by giving Naruto a fierce hug. He was shocked into stillness for a moment, but then he hugged her back, smiling. Sarutobi waited until they were done, and then addressed Naruto. Naruto, I think you'd be interested to know that Anko here wishes to adopt you. Naruto's eyes widened, before he leapt in the air, with a cry of, awesome. She smiled at the young boy's antics. The third continued, however, this is not possible. You see, Uzumaki was your mother's maiden name. Naruto looked confused, so Anko explained. That's what her family name was before she married your father. Oh, anyway, your father was the head of a very powerful clan, of which you are now the last member. Naruto's face fell. Just when I thought someone was gonna adopt me. Anko smiled at him reassuringly. Cheer up, kid, the old man has a solution. Sarutobi sighed. I was getting to that. As the last remaining member of the clan, you are the clan head, which mean that you have the right to accept into the clan anyone you find worthy. In a way, you'd be adopting Anko, if you said yes, of course. Naruto's excitement returned. So tell me, who was my father? The third smiled. You are the son of Kushina Uzumaki, and Minato Namikaze. Naruto's eyes bugged out. Even he knew that name, the name of the legendary fourth Hokage. He passed out. A few minutes later, he opened his eyes to see Anko standing over him, a worried expression on her face. You okay, kid? He nodded. Wow. The fourth Hokage. He grinned. I'm gonna be the greatest Hokage ever. Someday, I'll be even better than he was. His eyes sparkled, and for a moment, Anko was disturbingly reminded of Guy. She smiled at him. To do that, you're gonna have to train hard every day. Are you sure you can handle that? He punched the air. Believe it. She sweat dropped. The Hokage interrupted, asking, Naruto Namikaze, do you accept Anko Mitarashi into the Namikaze clan? He grinned. Of course. He turned to her. Anko Mitarashi, do you wish to become Anko Namikaze? She bowed. Yes, Hokage-sama. He nodded. It is done. He handed Anko the papers he'd filled out while waiting for her to arrive. She signed, and helped Naruto do the same. He bear hugged her. Yay, I finally have a mom. She smacked him in the back of the head playfully. I'll take care of you, kid, but don't call me that. It makes me feel old. He grinned. Okay, mom. She rolled her eyes, and after getting the key to the Namikaze compound from the third, she ran along the rooftops to her apartment, Naruto grinning on her back. A few minutes later, they arrived at the Namikaze compound, Anko's belongings sealed into a storage scroll in her trenchcoat. Unlocking the gate, they entered a winding path, surrounded by trees. They came to a bend in the path, and their eyes widened when they saw their new home. There was a tall, three-story house in the middle, with a few smaller houses flanking it. They were all painted a deep, forest green, and had been covered with grass mats, to look like trees when seen from a distance. Anko leapt to the roof, and pulled off the covering of the central house to reveal an old, Japanese-style roof. She pulled off the coverings of the others as well. As they explored the building, Anko noticed that the place was eerily clean for being abandoned all these years. Minato must have made a seal for that before he left. They each found a room that they liked. Naruto's was on the top floor, in what used to be a study. There were many windows, and, needless to say, it was packed with jutsu scrolls. Anko's was one floor down. It had a single window, facing the east. The kitchen on the ground floor was well equipped, though of course the cupboard were empty. There was even a machine especially for making ramen in one corner. After unsealing her stuff in her own room, Anko took Naruto to a nearby dango shop, so they could get to know each other better. Naruto's grip on Anko tightened as they passed the burned-out shell that used to be his apartment, but he said nothing. When they arrived at the shop, they sat in a small table off to the side, not wanting to draw any unwanted attention. They waited for a few minutes, and then a few more. Finally, Anko got tired of waiting, and used her striking shadow snakes to drag over a waiter. Are you going to serve us or not? He paled, but his gaze fell on Naruto, and his expression turned into a sneer. We don't serve the likes of him. She growled. Just then, the manager walked up. Ah, Anko-san, our favorite customer. Then, he noticed the waiter, still bound by snakes, and about to fall over. He sighed. What did he do? His eyes drifted to Naruto's whiskers. Ah, he turned to the man. You're fired. You know that's not the way we run things here. Get out of my sight. The man rushed away hurriedly, not wanting to be attacked again by the crazy snake lady. The manager apologized, and took their order himself. Anko turned to Naruto. Hey, kid, you ever had dango? He looked puzzled. What's dango? She smacked her forehead. We'll have the usual, please. He nodded, and carried their order to the kitchen. A few minutes later, a waitress came out with their order, 30 sticks of dango apiece. Naruto looked at his eyes wide. Wow, that's a lot of food. Anko chuckled. Don't worry, kid, if you can't eat it all, I'll help. 5 minutes later, Naruto was on his 25th stick, and showed no signs of stopping. Anko was on her 15th stick, eating a bit more slowly. When they had both finished, Naruto sighed in contentment. That was good. Anko nodded. The wonders of dango. A few seconds later, Naruto's eyelids began to droop, and a minute later, he was fast asleep. Anko paid for their meal, and left for their new home, Naruto on her back. 2 years passed. Naruto and Anko got along well together. Their days together were spent either playing around the house, or going out and playing in the park, though most people called it the Forest of Death. Every now and then, they'd go to a park that was a bit more public, but all of the children were kept away from them by their parents. Still, they had each other, and they were happy. Word had gotten out that Naruto was really the fourth son, so there were some people that treated them nicely, but for the most part, people still acted like he was the plague, and avoided him at all costs. Anko would often go on missions, and leave Naruto in Kakashi's care. However, she warned him that if Naruto got even a small glimpse of any of Kakashi's Ika Ika books, there'd be hell to pay. He took the warning to heart, and, not wanting to lose his manhood, he bought a safe, and locked them up whenever Naruto wasn't around. He enjoyed playing with the boy. The kid was practically a ball of energy, and often Anko would come back from a mission to find Kakashi laying on the floor, completely worn out, and Naruto riding on the back of one of his larger summons. There were no more attacks, and the two were happy. Anko had finally given in, and allowed Naruto to call her Mom. Finally, his first day at the academy came around. Bye, Mom, I'll see you after school. She smiled. Go get him. His first day was fairly uneventful. Most kids seemed a little nervous around him, though a few were pretty nice, and there was even an odd group of girls over in a corner, sending him looks he didn't quite understand. He was too young yet to know the irksomeness that is fangirlism. After class, there were a group of them chasing him, and he ducked into a bush to avoid them, only to find someone else already there. The kid had on white shorts, and a dark blue shirt. He raised an eyebrow. Hello. Are you hiding as well? A shrieking mass of girls rushed by, upset at having lost their quarry. Naruto nodded, pointing a thumb at the mob. Sasuke chuckled. My brother warned me about those. He called them fangirls. Naruto smacked himself in the head. Mom said something about those on my way out, but I wasn't paying attention. Sasuke nodded. Apparently, they'll go away if you ignore them. Or, at least they should. Naruto shuddered. I hope so. By the way, what's your name? Sasuke stuck out his hand. Sasuke Uchiha. And you? Naruto shook it. Naruto Namikaze. Sasuke's eyes widened. You don't seem that bad to me. Quote. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, your parents warned you about me. Sasuke shook his head. No, just my father. He's been acting kinda weird lately, though. Anyway, he told me to stay away from you. I wonder why. Naruto shook his head. I have no idea. Mom says she'll tell me once I become a genin. She said it's not my fault though. Sasuke shook his head sadly. Man, this doesn't make any sense. Naruto chuckled. According to my mom, life almost never does. Then she starts ranting about someone she calls, that hubby Tem. Sasuke shrugged. Wanna be friends? Naruto grinned. Hell yeah, and that was how their friendship started. Naruto enjoyed himself at the academy. Sure, the lectures were usually kinda boring, but he didn't wank to let Anko down, so he did his best to pay attention. He and Sasuke got along well, and were constantly tied for the top spot in academics. Naruto took first place in taijutsu, thanks to his incredible stamina, but lost to Sasuke in ninjutsu, due to his horrible control. The teachers learned to fear the times between classes, for the two boys were almost always pranking someone. When they ran out of ideas, which wasn't often, they would ask Anko for advice, and sometimes their traps were truly humiliating, though they never actually hurt anyone. Anko liked the dark-haired boy much better than most of his clansmen, and would often invite him to spend the night at the Namikaze house. Naruto and Sasuke were the best of friends, and they were both very open and kind to their classmates. In time, the other students realized that Naruto was actually a nice guy, and they didn't avoid him so much anymore. However, their happiness was brought to a sudden end, in their fourth year. Sasuke was about to go to sleep. He was spending the night at Naruto's house, and he was worn out from the massive game of tag they'd played earlier. Anko had joined in, and created around 30 snake clones. He heard his door swing open, and he was surprised to see Anko standing there, a worried expression on her face. What's wrong, Anko-san? She hugged him fiercely. Your family, they're all dead. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock. There was no way, was there? How? She released him, and looked him in the eye, not relishing what she was about to tell him. Your brother, he ed them all. Everyone, even your father and mother. Sasuke broke down completely, and Anko held him for an hour or so. Naruto came in. His mom had told him first, and he'd wanted to give her some time to make his best friend feel better. Sasuke, if there's anything I can do. Sasuke nodded, and wiped his eye. Just promise me that you'll never go away. Naruto held out his fist. I promise. Sasuke punched it. Friends forever, right? Naruto nodded, smiling. Yeah, friends forever. The next day, Naruto and Sasuke skipped class. The Uchiha compound was eerily silent in the morning light. Anbu had already disposed of the bodies, and the whole place smelled faintly of antiseptic. Sasuke retrieved his things from his room. From now on, he'd be living with the Namikazes. This place was no longer a home to anyone, and especially not to him. Perhaps, with time, he'd get over it, and maybe move back, but he didn't want to live alone. He was surprised to see a small scroll on his bed, locked with a blood seal. Biting his thumb, he spread some of his blood on it. He opened it, and was surprised to see a note from his brother, along with 2 jutsu shown below it. He read the letter first. Dearest brother, how I wish it hadn't come to this. The Uchiha are planning a coup d'état, a complete takeover of Konoha. You have not been told this because of your age, and your connection to the Namikaze boy. Even as I write this, I have been ordered to stop this from happening. If you are reading this, either they are all dead, or I have failed. Either way, I implore you, do not follow in our father's footsteps. He sought power for the Uchiha clan, simply because he thought they deserved it. Being an Uchiha does not guarantee strength, nor does it give anyone the right to take such strength by destroying others. Please, become strong, not for yourself, but for those you hold dear. I will love you, always. Farewell, little brother. P.S. Below, I have included 2 of my favorite jutsu. I encourage you to let your friend learn them as well. They are the Shadow Clone and the Exploding Shadow Clone techniques. Use them well. Sasuke held the scroll to his chest. Never in his life had he imagined that his father would do something like this, but it did kinda make sense. Sasuke sighed, his heart heavy. Even his mother had been in on it. He rejoined Naruto and Anko in the courtyard, and together, the 3 of them headed home. After that day, Sasuke was quieter than before, though he made a more serious effort to make friends, taking his brother's advice to heart. He detached the note on the scroll his brother had given him, saying he'd found it when he was getting his stuff together, which was technically true. The 2 boys mastered the Shadow Clone Jutsu midway through their final year, but the exploding version was a bit trickier. They either blew up immediately when summoned, or not at all. They moved all of the scrolls in the Uchiha library to Sasuke's new room in the Namikaze house. It used to be a normal library, smaller than the one Naruto inhabited, but still large enough to fit all of the scrolls. The previous occupants were moved to an empty room, also on the top floor. Sasuke's room was opposite Naruto's, and had as many windows. All the floors in the house were wood, and he loved the feel of it as he got out of bed each morning. Their last 2 years at the academy passed fairly uneventfully. Almost everyone in the class liked the boys, and the number of fangirls had not decreased, much to their dismay. Most of them were only minor annoyances, but 2 of them stood out especially. Sakura Haruno, who chased after Naruto from sunup till sundown, and Ino Yamanaka, her best friend, who was after Sasuke. After they passed their test, the 2 boys sat together, and prayed that they would be on the same team, and that it didn't include any of their fangirls. They groaned simultaneously when they heard that Sakura and Ino had passed. After all of the tests were done, Iruka, their teacher that year, walked to the front of the room, an expectant look on his face. Soon, all was quiet, as the new genin waited to hear their team assignments. Team 7, you are Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Namikaze. Both boys cheered loudly at this. and Hinata Hyuga. Sasuke looked to Hinata, and smiled, and her face turned bright red. Ino and Sakura sent her annoyed looks. Naruto woke in the night, shivering. His mom had said she wasn't feeling too good the night before, and had asked them not to make too much noise before going to bed. Listening intently, he could hear whimpers and moans of pain coming from downstairs. He rushed out of his room and nearly ran into Sasuke. They looked at each other and nodded. Silently, they crept to Anko's door and entered her room. They could see her thrashing on her bed, holding her shoulder. When her fingers moved, they saw a weird purple light emanating from between them. Naruto shook her shoulder gently. Mom, wake up. What's going on? In an instant, his back was against the wall, a kunai at his throat. Anko stared into his eyes for a few seconds, before lowering the knife she'd hidden under her pillow, and collapsed against him, sobbing. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other. Whoever had done this to her was going to pay dearly. This clearly was unnatural, judging by the purple light coming from her shoulder, and it must have been scary as hell. He'd never seen her like this before. After a minute or two, her sobs quieted. I'm sorry you two had to see that. Naruto hugged his mom tightly, and Sasuke joined in. What's wrong, Mom? She sighed. You remember that snake bastard I sometimes talk about? Naruto nodded. Talking wasn't really the right word for it. He often learned several new swear words during one of her rants. Sasuke paled, having a better grasp of history than his friend. You mean, Orochimaru, of the Sannin. Anko cursed viciously at her former sensei. Yeah, that's the one. I used to be that bastard's apprentice. Before he abandoned me, he gave me this. She shifted her nightshirt, to reveal a small mark that reminded Sasuke strongly of the tomo of the Sharingan. This damn seal was supposed to make me stronger, but he screwed it up, so all it does is give me nightmares. She shuddered. He can also use it to incapacitate me if he's nearby. Naruto and Sasuke shared a glance. Sannin or no, they would make the man pay, somehow or another. Naruto kissed his mother on the forehead, carrying her back to bed. She smiled weakly at the two boys. They headed back upstairs, to their rooms. The next morning, Anko looked a little sleepy, but otherwise no worse for the wear. She smiled gently at the two boys, as they all sat down to have breakfast. Naruto paused for a moment, and looked at his mom curiously. Mom, didn't you say that there was something you were gonna tell me once I became a genin? Anko sighed. I was not looking forward to this, but I can't stand to see so many people hate you, and you don't even know why. Naruto nodded. So, what is it? Anko bit her lip nervously. I know you and Sasuke are close, but are you sure you want him to hear this? He might not like you after this, no offense. She turned to Sasuke. This is some seriously life-changing shit. Naruto looked to Sasuke. He's my best friend, and my teammate besides. I'm sure he'll be fine with it. Sasuke nodded. It can't be that bad, can it? Anko chuckled. You have no idea. Sasuke shrugged, and Anko looked to Naruto nervously. 12 years ago, on the day you were born, the third Hokage passed a special decree, forbidding anyone to tell you or anyone of your generation about this. I talked with him, shortly after I adopted you, and convinced him to let me tell you. The truth is, when your dad defeated the Kyuubi all those years ago, he didn't it. Such a feat is impossible, for any mortal. Instead, he sealed it within a newborn child, his own son. Naruto's and Sasuke's faces bore identical shocked expressions, and if it weren't for the seriousness of what she'd just told them, Anko would be rolling on the floor laughing. Naruto looked to Sasuke, worry written on the lines of his face. Are we still friends? Sasuke looked impassive, and Naruto was beginning to despair, when he felt a sharp pain in the back of his head. Of course we are, Baka. You're still the same person, aren't you? Naruto sighed in relief. Alright, let's go kick some. I wonder who our sensei is. Unheard by them, Anko chuckled evilly as they ran out the door. After arriving at the academy, the two boys waited with Hinata for their new sensei. Pretty soon, all of the other fresh genin were gone, and after about an hour the two boys groaned simultaneously as they realized who their sensei must be. They only knew one Jonin who was ever this late, and he'd told them himself he was taking on a genin team this year. Even before his clan was murdered, Sasuke hung around the Namikaze house all the time, and he was no stranger to Kakashi's bad habits. What's wrong, Sasuke? Sasuke sighed. I know who our sensei is. Naruto nodded. Kakashi ni-san is always late to everything. That, and he's always looking in those perverted books of his. Despite Kakashi's best efforts, the boys had managed to pick the lock on his safe, and they'd read the first volume of the Ika Ika series together, and taken pictures to blackmail him with. Sasuke spoke up. I wonder what castration is. It must be pretty bad, 'cause Kakashi always turns white when Anko-san threatens him with it. Hinata, having studied medicine, blushed furiously. Sasuke noticed this, and he looked concerned. He put his hand on her forehead. Do you have a cold or something? You look awfully red. Hinata turned an even deeper shade of crimson, and passed out. Naruto elbowed his best friend. Hey, I think she likes you. Sasuke shrugged. I'd prefer her over those rabid fangirls. Both boys shuddered. Naruto was thoughtful for a moment. This could be a problem. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, and Naruto held up his hands in surrender. I don't mean the fact that she likes you, I mean the fact that she's probably gonna be fainting around you all the time. In a mission, Sasuke nodded. He could see how that would be a bad thing. Naruto looked over at his best friend, a small smile on his face. How do you feel about her? Sasuke shrugged. I don't really know her that well. Naruto sighed. How troublesome. On the other side of Konoha, Shikamaru sneezed violently, earning himself a whack in the head from Ino. Hinata awoke, and the three lapsed into a companionable silence. After a few minutes, Naruto had an idea. Nudging Sasuke, he pointed to the door. Sasuke nodded, and Hinata raised an eyebrow in confusion. What are you doing? Both boys got up, and began rigging an elaborate trap on the doorway. We know Kakashi ni-san won't ever change his ways, but it's fun to try. Naruto stepped back, admiring their handiwork. Whenever someone opened the door, they would be covered in bright pink chalk dust, slip on the oil poured in front of the door, and hopefully land butt first on the tacks they'd scattered. Sasuke smirked. Not one of our more elaborate traps, but it should be enough. They sat down again, with Sasuke sitting between Naruto and Hinata. Hinata poked her fingers together nervously. She'd had a crush on Sasuke ever since his family had died. It took strength to get through something like that and stay sane, and even more to come out of it as lighthearted as he was. She wanted to confess to him, but she didn't want to seem like another fangirl. She knew that both boys hated those. Sasuke saw her staring at her desk, and remembering what Naruto had said earlier, he decided to get to know her better. How about we all get to know each other? Naruto, having noticed Sasuke looking at Hinata, grinned. That sounds like a great idea. Hey Hinata, wanna go first? Hinata poked her fingers nervously. Me. Okay. Well, I like flowers, cinnamon rolls, and relaxing in the family garden. I don't too much like loud noises. I'm not that strong, but I'll do my best not to let you down. Sasuke smiled at her gently and she blushed. I'm sure you'll do fine, Hinata. Thank you, Sasuke-kun. Her face turned crimson, and she covered her mouth when she realized what she'd inadvertently said aloud, but Sasuke didn't notice, at least, he didn't seem to notice. On the inside though, his mind was whirling. Could he have finally found someone that actually liked him, not because he was the last Uchiha, but for who he was? He was lost in his thoughts for a moment, until he felt someone slap him upside the head. Ow, what was that for? Naruto smirked. I called your name like 5 times. Besides, consider it payback for this morning. Sasuke sighed. Alright, guess it's my turn. I like Dango, and playing pranks with Naruto. I also like playing tag with Naruto and Anko in the Forest of Death. I don't like fangirls, especially Ino Yamanaka. I also dislike people who hate Anko for who her sensei was, and Naruto for events beyond his control. I enjoy relaxing in my room, and learning new jutsu with Naruto. I also enjoy watching Anko chasing Kakashi. You wouldn't believe some of the things she's threatened to do to him with her snakes. Naruto piped up. I would. Sasuke rolled his eyes. I know you would. I was talking to Hinata. Naruto grinned cheekily, having succeeded. Hinata blushed furiously. Sasuke sighed. Your turn, Naruto. Naruto grinned. I like training, ramen, and playing pranks with Sasuke. I also like playing tag with Sasuke and my mom. I don't like fangirls, and I don't like people who treat me differently because of who or what I am. He paused for a moment. Oh, yeah, and I really don't like that snake bastard, Orochimaru. Sasuke nodded. He said, matter of factly, we're gonna him someday. Hinata paled, but as pale as she was already, neither of the two boys noticed. Just then, a certain perverted and eternally late Jonin poked his head in through the window. Noticing the trap in the doorway, he sighed. Come on, after all this time, did you two think I'd really fall for that? The boy's sweat dropped. Kakashi I smiled. Meet me up on the roof. The three new genin leapt out the window. Anko had taught the boys tree walking early on, and Sasuke carried Hinata. She nearly passed out, but she managed to keep herself together for long enough to get off on the roof. Kakashi was already there, waiting for them with his book in his hand. Naruto cleared his throat loudly, and Kakashi quickly hid it in his smut pouch. Okay, you three, how about we get to know each other better? Sasuke sighed. We already did that while we were waiting for you to get here, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's sweat dropped. Okay, I'd still like you to do it again, so I can get to know you better. Naruto opened his mouth, about to argue, but a stern look from Kakashi shut him up. Well, then, how about we start with you? Nah, suddenly, they heard a loud crash, as if someone had fallen on there. A few seconds later, Iruka's curses were echoing down the halls, scaring off the few remaining students. Kakashi sighed. You guys forgot to remove the trap, didn't you? Both boys' sweat dropped. Iruka burst through the door. His backside was drenched in oil, and pinned with thumbtacks, and neon pink chalk dust covered everything else. What's the meaning of this? Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Sorry, Iruka-sensei. Sasuke pointed at Kakashi. We actually set the trap for Scarecrow-san, but he came in through the window, and we kinda forgot about it. Iruka twitched. He looked like he was about to unleash his infamous giant head jutsu. Seriously, is he part Akamichi or something? But Kakashi raised his hands, trying to calm him down. Don't worry, I'll have them clean it. This time they heard another ow, and Mizuki came up the stairs, his hair thankfully devoid of chalk dust, but his backside covered in oil and thumbtacks, as well as being neon pink the real reason Mizuki hates Naruto, and tried to betray Konoha XD. A few hours, and a few ruptured eardrums later, Team 7 headed to the Dango stand, where Anko was waiting for them. So kids, how'd it go? Who's your new teammate? Naruto pointed a finger at her accusingly. You knew our sensei was gonna be Arrow Inu, pervy hound, didn't you? Anko chuckled at his nickname for the scarecrow. I might have known something about it. Her eyes drifted to Hinata, and she noticed the way the Hyuga heiress was looking at Sasuke. She grabbed the boy, and gave him a noogie. So, you've got another one after you. If I were you I'd do something about it. She looks pretty shy. Sasuke wriggled out of her grasp. Would you stop that? It's really embarrassing. Anko grinned. Since your mom isn't around, I gotta make sure someone embarrasses you every once in a while. Stop changing the subject though. Have you two kissed yet? Sasuke's face went beet red, matching Hinata's perfectly. Naruto sighed, and counted down on his fingers. 3, 2. When he said 1, both keeled over in perfect sync, each falling face first onto the other. At this point, they were unconscious, so they didn't know, but Naruto took a picture with the camera he kept in his trenchcoat. Anko watched, chuckling quietly. Guess that answers that question. She looked at her adopted son, proud of the way he turned out. He wore a trenchcoat similar to hers, but forest green, with black trim. His shirt was burnt orange, with a yellow lightning bolt on the front horizon. His pants were dark gray, and he wore standard black shinobi sandals. From playing and training outside with his mom and Sasuke whenever he got the chance, he had a healthy tan, and he kept his hair at shoulder length, letting it drape lightly over his headband. If his coat were white, he'd look almost exactly like his father, and God knows he had enough women chasing after him, before he found Kushina. If she were old enough back then, she admitted, she'd probably have gone after him herself. She smiled at that thought. Someday, he was gonna make some woman very happy, provided she met Anko's standards, of course. She was very protective of her son, as she realized that a person can be hurt in ways far worse than being beaten half to death. She knew that all too well. A few minutes later, the two woke up, and Hinata ran away quickly, shouting that her father expected her home soon, but her house was the other way. Anko laughed, and received a death glare from Sasuke. Anko stopped the boys before they entered the house. I have a guest heir, waiting, in the living room. I caught him peeping at the hot spring, but I think he could help with your training. He's the Toad Sannin, Jiraiya. Naruto's eyes widened. Whoa, that's the guy that taught my father. How'd you catch him? She grinned evilly. He was distracted, so I tied him up with Tsunejishu, striking shadow snakes, and I knocked him out. Both boys winced. Knowing Anko, it was doubtful Jiraiya would be able to father children anytime soon. She saw their faces, and laughed. Don't worry, I didn't hurt him much. They entered the house to find a still unconscious Jiraiya on the sofa, a thin trickle of drool escaping his mouth. Anko kicked him in the side. Wake up, pervert, he groaned. Where am I? He opened his eyes, and saw Naruto leaning over him, concerned. Minato. Did she me? Naruto grinned, and Jiraiya noticed his whiskers. Oh, you're his kid, aren't you? His eyes drifted to Anko, and he tried desperately to run away, only to fall on the floor, his hands and feet still bound. Gah, do you have any respect for your elders? Anko growled. Sannin or no, the next time I find you peeping on me, I'm gonna stick my foot so far up you'll all have to open your mouth to cut my toenails. Jiraiya paled. Fine, just untie me. Sasuke smirked as Naruto untied the old man. Anko-san, are you sure he's a Sannin? He doesn't look like much. Now untied, Jiraiya postured in the retarded way that only he can. Do you know who you're talking to? I am the great Toad Sage Jiraiya. Master of Senjutsu. Seducer of many women. At this, Anko slapped him in the back of the head. Can it, you pervert? He rubbed his head. I'm not a pervert. Anko raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Then what were you doing peeping at the hot springs? He grinned cheesily. I'm a super pervert. Anko punched him, thus knocking him unconscious. Again, Naruto and Sasuke sweat dropped. About half an hour later, Jiraiya awoke, rubbing his head. Quickly, he checked the room for the crazy snake lady. He was relieved to find that she wasn't there. He tiptoed to the doorway in an attempt to sneak out, only to find a certain whiskered blonde standing on the ceiling in front of the doorway. Jiraiya sighed. Whata ya want, kid? You trained my father, didn't you? Jiraiya crossed his arms. Yeah, why? Naruto bit his lip. Well, I was wondering if you'd tell me about him. All I've got are pictures, and a few stories from mom about his pranks. Jiraiya smiled. Sure kid. Wait a minute, I thought your mom was dead. Naruto's face crumpled, and mentally, Jiraiya smacked himself in the forehead. Of course, if he was living with that crazy snake lady, she probably was related to him, or had adopted him. He knew that both of Naruto's parents were the last of their clan, so that only left adoption. Sorry, kid, I didn't mean to upset you like that. Naruto sighed. I'm okay. Jiraiya smiled. I think I'll stick around for a while, if you don't mind. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, his face became a bit more serious. If you're gonna stay here though, it's a good idea to stay on mom's good side. Otherwise, she'll send her snakes after you. Kakashi Nisan no, Kakashi sensei now, got on her bad side one day, and he screamed like a girl when she made one of them go into his pants. He chuckled. He's never gonna live that down. I have pictures, wanna see? Jiraiya chuckled. Some other time, maybe. Right now, I'd really like to get some sleep. Naruto pouted. Haven't you been sleeping all day? Jiraiya twitched. I was knocked out, it's not the same thing. Besides, I have a massive headache. Naruto nodded. Alright, I guess you can sleep on the couch, we don't have any beds ready. The next morning, Naruto and Sasuke met Hinata at the memorial stone, waiting for their sensei to arrive. Unknown to them, Jiraiya had decided to tag along. When Kakashi arrived, he glanced swiftly up to the tree Jiraiya was sitting in, but said nothing. Naruto sighed. Kakashi-sensei, have you ever been on time for anything? Kakashi looked to the sky, as if trying to remember, and the three genin sweat dropped. He shrugged. Anyway, today, I'll be giving you a test. Hinata poked her fingers together. AT test. He nodded. That's right. This test is to determine whether or not you become full genin. Naruto twitched. Aren't we genin already? Kakashi shrugged. Okay, let me put it this way. This test is to determine whether or not you deserve to keep the title of ninja. If you fail, you'll either be sent back to the academy, or quit being ninja altogether. Sasuke smirked. I guess we'll just have to pass it, then. What's the test? Kakashi chuckled at the boy's confidence. This test is many times harder than the standard genin exam. Your objective, he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing 2 silver bells, is to get these from me. Whoever doesn't get a bell, fails. Hinata poked her fingers together. But Kakashi-sensei, doesn't that mean that one of us will fail no matter what? He nodded. That's correct, Hinata. He walked over to the training posts, activating an alarm clock, and setting it on top of the middle one. You have until noon. Go. Immediately, all three vanished into the surrounding trees. Beneath his mask, he smiled. Well, this should be interesting. Meanwhile, in the cover of the trees, the three were having a team meeting. Sasuke looked to his teammates. Obviously, it's a trap. If they wanted to separate us, they wouldn't have put us on the team. Naruto nodded. He probably was trying to split us up, telling us one would fail no matter what. I think the true goal of the test is teamwork. Hinata sighed. I wish I were as smart as you guys. Sasuke smiled at her. It's not that we're smarter than you, it's that we've known him longer. He's always going on about how teamwork is a ninja's most powerful asset, so it's no surprise that a test made by him will be all about it. Hinata nodded. That makes sense. Naruto punched the air. Alright, let's go kick the scarecrows together. Hinata smiled, and Sasuke nodded. Suddenly, they heard someone clearing their throat behind them. They jumped, and turned to see Kakashi walking towards them, clapping. Congratulations. You pass. Meet at the Hokage's office at 8 tomorrow for our first mission. He vanished in a puff of smoke, and Sasuke smirked. I knew it. Up in his tree, Jiraiya chuckled quietly. They headed to their favorite spot for Dango, as they knew Anko would be waiting to hear how their first day went. She smiled at them as they approached her table, and Hinata blushed, remembering what had happened the last time she saw Naruto's mom. Hello, Anko-san. Anko grinned at the young genin. Relax, I'm not going to eat you. They sat down at the table, and Anko looked at them expectantly. Well, how'd it go? How long did it take you to pass his test? Naruto grinned. About a minute. Wait, you knew about the test? She chuckled. Of course. He gives the same test every time he takes on a team. If you'd done any research, instead of bouncing around the house like a lunatic on crack all night long, you might have known about it too. Sasuke laughed, and she turned her gaze to him. You, sir, were no better. I swear, between the two of you, I'll have gray hair before I'm 30. Hinata giggled, and Sasuke's sweat dropped. She turned back to Naruto. So, how'd it go? He rubbed the back of his head. We figured out the true purpose of the test, and he heard us, so he passed us. It was kinda disappointing, really. We didn't get to do anything. Anko laughed. Well, congratulations, kids. You're the first ever to pass his test. Naruto's eyes bugged out, Sasuke's eyebrows raised, and Hinata, of course, fainted. After they woke her up, Hinata left for her home, leaving Anko and her boys at the dango shop. Her face lost its joking expression, though they could still tell she was happy about something. Sasuke, I have something important to tell you. He perked up, his attention focused completely on the woman he'd come to consider his mother. Sasuke, I have decided to take you on as my apprentice. Do you accept? He nodded mutely. She saw Naruto about to protest, but she held up a hand, silencing him. Someone else has already expressed a wish to take you as their own. Speak of the devil. Naruto turned to face the direction he was looking at. I don't see him. All I see is an old pervert. Wait, you mean he wants to train me? A joyous expression plastered itself on Naruto's face, and he collapsed. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. He can't be that good, can he? Anko shook her head. Oh, he's good all right. He's the one who trained Naruto's father, and you know how powerful the fourth turned out to be. I have a feeling Naruto might even surpass him. Sasuke grinned. Well, I know I sure as hell won't let him surpass me. When does training start? As the weeks passed them by, the three genin gradually grew stronger. Since Naruto and Sasuke each had their own personal trainer, Kakashi spent most of his time training Hinata, pushing her taijutsu skills to the limit. When they sparred, she would even beat the boys sometimes, and as her confidence grew, her stutter vanished, and she began to improve rapidly. She learned tree climbing, and then water walking, along with her teammates. From Kakashi, she learned the headhunter jutsu, and she would often use it in their practice sessions, much to the annoyance of her teammates. Naruto learned the dark swamp jutsu, and was growing out his hair in preparation for learning the needle jizo. Sasuke learned the fireball jutsu from his clan scrolls. With the control training from Anko he could exhale a massive fireball almost instantly. They were progressing rapidly, and eager to test their skills. However, they were still stuck with D-rank missions. Surprisingly, it was Hinata who spoke up one day, at the Hokage's office. Good job, Team 7. Your next mission is to pull weeds at the client's garden, dig up potatoes, and, Hinata interrupted him. Pardon me, Hokage-sama, but aren't these missions way below our skill level? We've been training intensively for the past 2 months, and these are a waste of our abilities. Could we not get a C-rank mission? The third paused for a moment, deliberating. I suppose. It just so happens that we have a mission that would be perfect for you. He smiled. The client had actually requested this team specifically. However, if they didn't even have the courage to speak up and ask for a better mission, there was no way they were ready for one. He turned to his aide. Send in the client. The door opened, and an elderly man walked in, accompanied by a kunoichi about their own age. She wore a cloud headband. They bowed to the Hokage, and he nodded politely. This man is a delegate from Cloud. You will be escorting him back to his village, and aiding his guard in dealing with bandits, and the like. He smiled at them. I am Reimaru, and my guard here is Yugito. Yugito inclined her head towards the three. It is a pleasure to meet you. Her face reddened slightly when she saw Naruto, but Sarutobi was the only one who noticed. Reimaru turned to the door. We will be leaving the village in an hour. Team 7 exited as well, and Sarutobi sighed. You can come out now, Jiraiya. The pervert grinned. No matter how good he was at stealth, he never could hide from his sensei. He saw the worn expression on his master's face, and his grin quickly faded. You think he'll try something once they get to Cloud? Sarutobi nodded. They've been after the Byakugan for years, and I doubt that they'll pass up a chance to take the Sharingan as well. On top of that, if they find out that Naruto is a Jinchuriki, and for the Kyuubi, no less. Things could get ugly. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Why did you send them? Sarutobi smirked. If all goes according to plan, we may ourselves acquire a new Jinchuriki. Jiraiya nodded. It was that girl, wasn't it? Sarutobi nodded. I think so. I want you to go with them, unseen, so that you can help if things get too bad. It's obvious by her over-polite manner that the girl is not treated well. She will most likely jump at the chance to become a Konoha-nin. Jiraiya smiled. The fact that she seems to like my pupil won't hurt, either. Alright, old man, I'll go. With that, the pervy sage vanished, and Sarutobi rested his forehead on his steepled hands. Naruto practically vibrated on their way to the gate. This was his first time outside of the village, so, naturally, he was excited. He thought about the kunoichi that would be traveling with them, and blushed. She sure was easy on the eyes. He shook his head, trying to rid himself of those thoughts. The pervy sage must be wearing off on him. Sasuke was excited as well, though he did a slightly better job of hiding it than Naruto. He'd be able to see new sights, meet new people, and, since they would be relatively isolated on their journey, maybe he and Hinata could get to know each other better. He smiled. His other teammate was a shy girl, but that's what he liked about her. It was a well-known fact that both boys absolutely hated fangirls. It was nice to have someone who liked him, but respected his privacy. He looked over to her. Her eyebrows were scrunched in thought, and there was a small scowl on her face. What's wrong? She started, then blushed. It's nothing, I just have really bad memories of Cloud Ninja. Sasuke nodded. He'd heard about the failed attempt to kidnap her, when she was 4, though it wasn't required reading, it was in their history textbook, and he'd read the whole thing, just in case. Naruto, however, had not, and he was confused. He was about to ask her what she meant, but Sasuke elbowed him in the ribs. He leaned over and whispered, later. Naruto nodded, and waved to their client as they came in view of the gate. 5 minutes later, Kakashi showed up, and they set off for Cloud. That night, they set up camp, Kakashi and their clients sharing one tent, and everyone else sharing another. Hinata blushed furiously when she saw that Sasuke was in the sleeping bag next to hers, and soon passed out. Sasuke sighed. We have got to get her to stop doing that. Naruto nodded. So, what was it that she was talking about earlier? Sasuke's expression was a somber one. 8 years ago, there was a man, a delegate from Cloud. He had come to negotiate a peace treaty between Cloud and Leaf. However, that was not why he was there. His actual mission was to somehow get his hands on a main branch Hyuga, and take him or her back to Cloud, so they could obtain the Byakugan by breeding. Naruto grimaced. I'm guessing Hinata is the one he tried to kidnap. Sasuke nodded. Yeah, her fathered him before he could get away, though. Cloud demanded his head on a stick, so the Hyuga gave up Hazashi, Lord Hiyashi's identical twin brother. Ever since then, Hinata has been viewed with extreme contempt in the Hyuga clan, especially by the branch members. If they got to know her though. He smiled, and Naruto chuckled. Sounds like you're in love, bro. Sasuke blushed. Maybe. I think I am. Naruto laughed quietly. You better make the first move, then. She's gotten a lot more confident recently, but she still faints every time she gets near you. I doubt she'll be able to. Sasuke sighed. Unfortunately, you're right. I just can't figure out what to say. Naruto shrugged. Sleep on it. I'm going to sleep. Good night. Sasuke lay back on his bed, and soon, soft snores filled the tent. Hinata, having awoken a few seconds after she passed out, was red as a tomato. Sasuke liked her. Really? The next morning, Naruto awoke to the smell of breakfast. He smiled. Stepping out of the tent, he saw the rest of his team waiting for him, along with Reimaru and Yugito. She turned away from him, trying to hide her blush. Sasuke noticed, but said nothing. Naruto finished his food quickly, and they set off for Cloud. On the way, Naruto managed to strike up a conversation with Yugito. So, what's your village like? She shrugged. It's on top of a huge mountain. The air is pretty thin, and the sun rises. She smiled. Naruto nodded. What are your friends like? She bit her lip. I don't really have any. I've never really met anyone, aside from my instructors. Naruto saddened, but then he looked to Yugito, a comforting smile on his face. I know what that's like, kinda. Tell ya what, I'll be your friend. Her eyes widened, but then she smiled at him gently. Thanks. He rubbed the back of his head. No problem. She bit her lip, and stared at the ground for a bit. Would he still like her, even after he found out about her tenant? Naruto was smart for once, and didn't push her. He stared into the sky thinking. Would Yugito still want to be friends with him, once she found out about the Kyuubi? As he thought of the beast, it opened its eye, sensing a familiar aura coming from the girl. He thought about warning the boy, but decided against it. The loudmouth probably wouldn't listen to him anyway. Meanwhile, Sasuke was attempting to get Hinata out of her shell, but every time he got too close, she turned red, and he had to back off so as not to make her faint. There were no bandits attacking them that day, and they made good time. As they were setting up camp, Reimaru remarked, we should reach Cloud tomorrow afternoon if we keep this up. He smiled. It will feel good to be home. Yugito scowled, but Naruto was the only one to notice. He resolved to ask about it the next day. When Naruto awoke, he looked over to find Hinata's sleeping bag snuggled up to Sasuke's, and he took a picture. He chuckled. He'd have to get these made into an album soon, the way things were going between those two. He left the tent, and sat with the three adults, enjoying his breakfast. Reimaru's eyes widened at the speed at which Naruto was shoveling food in his mouth, and Kakashi laughed at the look on the diplomat's face. He does this all the time. He doesn't like to wait for anything, meals included. Naruto wiped his mouth, and glared at Kakashi. Yeah, and I especially don't like waiting 2 hours on the training ground for you to show up, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi shrugged. I get lost on the road of life often. Naruto, Reimaru, and Yugito sweat dropped simultaneously. Just then, Sasuke left the tent, an unconscious Hinata draped over his shoulder. Naruto laughed, and Sasuke sent him a death glare. If I find out that you had anything to do with that, I will ensure that you die a slow, painful death. Naruto fell to the ground, clutching his sides. It wasn't me. You did that one all on your own. Or should I say, together. Ha ha ha. Sasuke twitched, and Naruto got up and ran, Sasuke shortly behind. Reimaru and Yugito looked to Kakashi questioningly, and he sweat dropped. Naruto is somewhat of a practical joker, though if I'm right about what happened, it, surprisingly, wasn't his fault this time. Reimaru raised an eyebrow. What do you think happened? He looked to the still unconscious Hinata. Kakashi sighed. Hinata is easily embarrassed, and she faints a lot. She also happens to have a crush on Sasuke, a feeling I'm beginning to think is mutual. They probably got rather close last night, in their sleep, and when Hinata woke up, well, see for yourself. A few minutes later, Sasuke and Naruto collapsed against each other, exhausted. All, huff, kill you, huff, later. Hinata had regained consciousness a few minutes earlier, and, remembering how she'd awoken, fainted again. When everyone finally gathered themselves at the campfire, the sun was just peeking over the horizon. They set off, Kakashi leading the way, Naruto and Sasuke bringing up the rear, and Hinata flanking their client along with Yugito. They could just see the mountain that Cloud was built on in the distance, and the terrain was getting rockier every step they took. They passed 2 large boulders, and Kakashi took note of the shinobi hiding there. Inwardly, he sighed. There were 3 of them, 2 Chunin and a Junin. Everybody, get into a defensive formation. The 4 genin formed a diamond around Reimaru, who, surprisingly, wasn't showing any fear. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he saw the enemy team detach themselves from the boulder. The Junin smirked at him, kunai at the ready. The 3 were heavily muscled, and wore the symbol of the hidden stone. Hey, this doesn't look tough. You two, take those brats. I'll handle the monkey. Kakashi twitched. Concealed underground, Jiraiya smirked. Well, looks like I get to see how my student's doing, or at least hear about it. Kakashi sighed. Looks like I'm going to have to be serious on this one. I was hoping to not have to use this, but it looks like I have no choice. He reached to his headband, but he was forced to leap back as the rock Jonin slammed the ground in front of him, opening a deep chasm where the copy Nin had been standing. Standing up, he smirked. Earth style. Impermanence. Kakashi glared back at him, uncovering his Sharingan as he landed. Sasuke gasped. How did you get the Sharingan? Kakashi launched into a series of hand seals, his tomo spinning wildly. I'll tell you later. This really isn't the time for it. Naruto tensed as one of the Chunin began a chain of hand seals. Earth style. Earth pillar prison. He slammed his hand into the ground, and several stone columns rose from it, surrounding the genin completely, and cutting them off from their sensei. The 2 stone nin melted into the pillars, and an ominous laugh seemed to come from all sides. Pathetic. You're shaking like leaves. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Seriously, is that the best you can come up with? I've heard it said that stone nin were dumb, but come on. Shaking like leaves. One of the Chunin growled. Suddenly, a torso emerged from a pillar right behind him, and the stone nin lashed out with his kunai, only to have the chakra points in his arm shut down by Hinata. Before he could retreat into the pillar, she landed a palm strike on his forehead, knocking him out immediately. The other jumped out behind Yugito, his arm hardening. Earth style. Stone armor. He punched, expecting to hit Yugito, but Naruto leapt in front of the attack, and the Cloud Kunoichi could hear an audible snap as his collarbone broke. He flew into a pillar, breaking it in 2. Yugito grabbed the stone nin's arm, and her hand burst into blue flame. The fire consumed the Chunin, ing him almost instantly. She ran over to Naruto, who'd passed out from the pain. She could see a fist-shaped mark where the stone nin's punch had actually cut into him. It was pulsing faintly with red chakra, and steam was rising from it, the wound sealing itself as she watched. Her eyes widened. Could he be a Jinchuriki as well? Inwardly, Reimaru smirked. The reports were true after all. Kakashi leapt to the side, dodging yet another punch from the stone nin. And you're a Jonin. Pathetic. The stone nin twitched. You're going down, monkey man. He roared, and charged at Kakashi, fist raised for another strike. Kakashi jumped into the air, sending a fireball rolling towards his opponent. The stone nin simply walked through it, his stone armor protecting him from the heat. He smirked. Is that the best you got, monkey man? He looked around, but did not see Kakashi. Oh, so it's a game of hide and seek, is it? A voice came from below him. You're an idiot. He felt a sharp tug on his ankle, and then he was neck deep in the ground. He looked over to where his subordinates had been fighting, only to see the genin emerge with their client from a mass of fallen pillars. All of them were unharmed, save for the blonde, who was draped over the Cloud Kunoichi's shoulder. Kakashi squatted, and looked him in the eye. Who sent you, and why? The stone nin smirked. I ain't telling you a thing. He stuck out his tongue, then slammed his chin on the ground. Blood poured out of his mouth for a few seconds, and he died, his expression frozen in a defiant smirk. Kakashi made a few hand signs, and the dead Jonin's head sank beneath the ground. We'll camp here, for now. Reimaru shook his head. We could make it to Cloud by nightfall, why not continue? Kakashi looked him in the eye. While it's true we could easily make it to Cloud under normal conditions, Naruto is wounded, and carrying him would slow us down. It's better to wait until morning, And besides, I need to check out his wound to make sure the bones set properly. Yugito gently placed Naruto on the ground. I can take care of that. I've had medical training. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, but he nodded. Okay. Hinata, Sasuke, set up camp. Yugito used a basic scanning jutsu to find out the extent of his injuries, and she winced. The punch had not only broken his collarbone in 2 places, but dislocated his right arm as well. She also found a small amount of poison in his system. The stone chunin must have covered their fists with it. It didn't look deadly, but it'd take a few days for a normal person to get over it. If her theory was correct, and he was a Jinchuriki, then it would only take 1 night. She gently grasped his arm, and popped it back into its socket. Naruto groaned, but did not wake. Carefully, she bound his shoulder to keep the bones in place. She set him down on top of his sleeping bag, and smiled. He looked so cute when he was sleeping. She blushed. A part of her hoped that he was a Jinchuriki. Normal ninja just couldn't relate to the loneliness, the fear, the hatred. Sitting back, she began to think. Which Biju, if any, lived in Naruto-kun? She knew it couldn't be the 2 or 8 tails, as those belonged to Cloud. From the reports she'd heard, it probably wasn't the 1 tail either. That sand genin that was the terror of his village was said to be able to manipulate sand itself, which was a known power of the Shukaku. Yugito left the tent, her eyes wide. All throughout the trip, Naruto had been a constant source of positive energy for her. Could it really be possible for someone who was a Jinchuriki to be so happy? Her admiration for the boy increased considerably. If he'd grown up in a way even remotely similar to her, it was a miracle that he was still sane, let alone positive. The fact that the Kyuubi destroyed a large portion of leaf before it was sealed couldn't have helped matters, either. For someone to come out of that like he did, he must be very strong, or else he'd befriended the Kyuubi as she'd befriended the Nibi. Somehow, she doubted it was the latter, as the Kyuubi had a reputation for being the most bloodthirsty of all the Biju. She wasn't even sure he was a Jinchuriki, and there was only one person who would know that sort of information, besides Naruto himself. Somehow, she got the feeling that he wouldn't appreciate her asking him if he had a demon sealed in his gut. Kakashi sighed. It had been a long day, and he just wanted to get to sleep. He told Sasuke that he'd tell them all the story about how he got his Sharingan when the mission was over. They couldn't afford to be distracted by something like that while on duty. He heard footsteps coming closer to him, and he rolled his eye. Sasuke, I said I'll tell you about it when the mission is over. Go get some sleep. Yugito smiled. Hitaki-san, there's something I wish to talk to you about. Kakashi turned to face her. Yeah, he patted the ground next to him, and she sat. I know I probably shouldn't be asking this, but, is Naruto a Jinchuriki? Kakashi's eye widened. Why would you think that? She shook her head. He heals incredibly fast. I noticed some kind of reddish chakra heal him. Kakashi nodded. It's a Kekkei Genkei. It's not very famous, but Naruto is the last of the Namikaze clan, and he carries their bloodline, granting him an incredible rate of healing, as well as vast endurance and chakra capacity. Don't mention it to him though. He would consider it an insult to his pride to suggest that his strength comes from anything more than hard work and determination. Yugito bit her lip, but said nothing. Inwardly, she sighed. Of course, she couldn't expect Leaf to advertise their Jinchuriki, if they had one. If word got out that they possessed the Kyuubi, many of the other nations might join together to eradicate the threat they represented. It was hardly likely that he would have confirmed Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki, even if it were true. Thank you, Hitaki-san. Kakashi laid back in his hammock, and mentally, he groaned. She probably hadn't believed a word he'd said, and considering where they were going, if she confirmed that Naruto was a Jinchuriki, they'd all be in great danger. Alliance be damned. Yugito glanced at Naruto as she laid down next to him. He hadn't awoken since the stone chunin knocked him out, but he seemed to be recovering, and expelling the poison at a superhuman rate. She checked his bandages to make sure they were still tied properly, and he opened one eye sleepily. Yugito-chan, is that you? She smiled. Yeah, it's me. Then, she smacked him in the head. He frowned at her. Hey, what was that for? She humphed. I can take care of myself, you big dummy. You almost got yourself. Underneath them, Jiraiya snickered. Those two were acting like an old married couple. He'd watched the battle, lopsided as it was, and he thought Yugito made a good match for his apprentice. It didn't hurt that she was also a Jinchuriki. Naruto raised his hands defensively. Hey, that's what friends are for. Her frown softened. Don't do it again, okay. Eventually, everyone but Sasuke went to sleep. He'd drawn first watch. He tried to convince Kakashi to let them watch in groups of two, but Kakashi denied him. You and Hinata would probably just end up making out, anyway. At this, Sasuke had done his best impression of a tomato, and by the time he managed to say anything, his sensei was already gone. He sighed. Lookout duty was so boring. Meanwhile, back in the hidden leaf, Sakura rebandaged her bloody knuckles for what must have been the 100th time. She winced as the cloth scraped against her raw flesh, but it was nothing to the pain she felt inside. How could he abandon me? She wiped the tears from her face. Sighing, she sat against a nearby tree. Ever since they'd been split up into teams, she'd been hoping that, somehow, Naruto would start noticing her, and maybe. Well, there was no chance of that, now. It had been almost a month, and nothing. Sure, she saw him every now and then, but when she called to him, he acted as if he simply didn't hear her. Even when they were in the Hokage's office receiving missions, he walked out of the door as soon as his was assigned, leaving no time for a discussion. Hugging her knees, she stared off into the forest, alone as she'd ever felt. Naruto yawned and stretched as he left the tent. He'd slept like a rock last night, relieved from lookout duty because of his injuries. Nudging Sasuke and Hinata awake with his foot, he left the tent to sit by the fire, eagerly eating the cooked rat his sensei handed him. They'd been trained to draw nutrients out of just about anything in the academy. Ninja couldn't afford to be squeamish. Sasuke came out behind him, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, followed by an equally sleepy Hinata. Yugito and Reimaru hadn't gotten up, and Kakashi decided to use that opportunity to speak to his students. I think that something's up. From my observations of Reimaru, I'm starting to think that this is more than a simple escort mission. Considering Cloud's history with the Hyuga, I think they may try to hold us, or you three at least. Hinata spoke up. I can understand why they'd want me and Sasuke, for our bloodline limits, but why would they want Naruto? Kakashi turned to Naruto, who sighed. Because I'm a Jinchuriki. Hinata frowned in confusion. That term sounds familiar. Her eyes widened as she remembered, and put the pieces together. You contain the Kyuubi. Naruto simply nodded. Kakashi froze, as he heard a familiar voice from behind him. Does he now? He turned around to see Yugito walking out of the tent she shared with Reimaru. Immediately, Kakashi's eye flickered to the tent, and, answering his unspoken question, Yugito said, Reimaru is not yet awake. Kakashi sighed. Well, then, what are we going to do with you? Yugito raised an eyebrow. Nothing, if the treaty Cloud just made with your village is to survive. Kakashi narrowed his eye. And I'm sure that Cloud will just let a Jinchuriki, guarded only by his sensei and two teammates, walk freely out of their gates. Naruto glowered indignantly. I can take care of myself, sensei. Kakashi snorted. Not against an entire village, you can't. Not to mention that, if our intel is correct, they have the Eight Tails host, who is twice your age, and much more in control of his demon than you are. No, we need to abort this mission. Yugito scowled. You would abort the mission, and insult the greatest of the hidden villages besides Leaf itself, over an assumption of what might happen. Kakashi turned to face her. Are you implying that you aren't going to tell your superiors about this? He pulled up his headband, using his Sharingan to make sure that she wasn't lying. She looked into Naruto's pleading eyes, and nodded silently. However, it is likely that, once we get to the village, someone will notice. I suggest that we deliver Reimaru, then run like hell before they can trap us. Kakashi raised a hand in protest. Us. Yugito looked him in the eye. If I assist you, even if it's just by not telling my superiors about Naruto's condition, I will be executed. Kakashi shook his head suspiciously. What reason do you have to betray your village? Yugito closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were a brilliant, flaming blue. Because Cloud has 2 Jinchuriki. For a moment, no one spoke, or moved. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Naruto's face, and he whispered, finally, someone like me. Yugito smiled at him gently. Yup. Then, they heard a rustling noise, and everyone turned to the campfire, eating their breakfast as if nothing had happened. Reimaru eyed Yugito suspiciously as he bit into a bite of now cold rabbit, but said nothing. They reached Cloud at around noon, and Naruto gawked at the mountain fortress that, unlike most of the other hidden villages, was actually hidden. A thick layer of clouds obscured it, which turned out to be a massive genjutsu, as the clouds disappeared as soon as they entered the gate. An elderly man, who looked by his dress to be a part of Cloud's council, welcomed them. Welcome to the hidden cloud. I trust you'll stay the night before heading out. By the tone of his voice, this was clearly not a request. Kakashi sighed. I suppose so. The man smiled, but his eyes were cold. Excellent. I've already taken the liberty of preparing a place for you to stay. He waved over a young shinobi, who looked to be an early chunin. Bob, you show our guests to their quarters. Yugito, report to the Raikage's office for a debriefing. Yugito was disappointed at not being allowed to stay with her companions, but said nothing. Kakashi reached out to her, and she shook his hand. It's been a pleasure working with you. When she withdrew her hand, she could feel the piece of paper he'd slipped her. She nodded. Same here. I hope that you have a safe trip home. Kakashi I smiled, and she body flickered to the nearest rooftop, tucking the note into her kunai pouch when she was sure no one was looking. Quickly, she ran across the rooftops to the Raikage's tower. Yugito sighed as she entered her small apartment. The Raikage was a perceptive man, and she had been hard-pressed not to reveal her secret. Fortunately, it seemed Thader B, the Raikage's lunatic brother, and 8 Tails Jinchuriki, had offended someone important. From what she heard, this time it was a close relative of the Daimyo of Lightning. The Raikage had been in a rush to get through her debriefing, and resolve his brother's latest mess. Still, she doubted that she'd fooled him completely. Raw power alone did not a cage make. Taking out the note from her pouch, she read Kakashi's cramped handwriting. The message was simple. Meet us at the gate. A fireball will be your signal. She allowed some of her tenant's chakra to leak out from her palm, incinerating the note almost immediately. Kurenai watched her students, her expression concerned. Kiba was antagonizing Shino at every opportunity, and Shino merely ignored him as he leaned against a nearby training post. It was Sakura who troubled her the most, however. Ever since she arrived at the training grounds, about 5 minutes ago, she'd been attacking her training post furiously, battering it with all of her force. She was almost like a wild animal. The one time Kiba had tried to taunt her, she'd lashed out at him, giving him a black eye, before returning to the training post, beating on it with the same single-minded intensity. Kiba left her alone after that. Sighing, the illusionist dropped down to begin the day's lesson. The next morning, when Team 7 attempted to leave, they found an 8-man squad of Cloud Jonin waiting for them. I am sorry, Mr. Hitaki, but we have orders to not let you leave. Kakashi raised his eyebrow. Really? And why would that be? The man smirked. For bringing a demon into our village. I'm afraid I'll have to take you into custody. Naruto growled. Kakashi slipped into a combat stance, kunai in hand. Sasuke. Now. Sasuke nodded, having already finished the short chain of hand seals required for his signature technique. Inhaling deeply, he spat a ball of fire, pretending to trip as he did so, the fireball went almost straight up, rolling towards the Cloud Nin when it hit the ground. When the smoke cleared, there was a half-dome of earth covering the enemy. As the wall crumbled, their leader smirked. That was clever, boy, changing the trajectory so that we'd be thrown off. That would have worked against a genin, and maybe even a particularly slow chunin, but it won't work on a jonin. He stiffened as he felt a kunai slit his throat. The last words he ever heard were, "Yeah, but this will." Kakashi disappeared back into the earth, out of range of the now shaken Cloud Nin. Yugito yawned. She'd been waiting at her window all night, keeping watch for Team 7's fireball. She jumped up as a reddish glow lit her face. The time had come. She rushed out of her apartment. Everything she'd need was already in a storage scroll, in her kunai pouch. Leaping across the rooftops, she prayed that she wouldn't be too late. She could see the gates up ahead, and she arrived just in time for a stray kunai from a Cloud Nin to pierce her gut. She fell down, vomiting blood, and the last thing she saw before losing consciousness was a pair of sapphire eyes turning a deep, bloody crimson. Naruto erupted with rage, a demonic, one-tailed shroud blazing across his skin. The Cloud Nin paled, and Naruto decapitated one, his red-orange claws lashing out wildly. Before the rest of them could react, he had his fist through another one's gut, and he wrenched it out viciously. The blood that fountained out sizzled when it hit his cloak, and it seemed to enrage him even more. Before he could cause any more carnage, however, a Cloud Nin managed to get behind him and slap a chakra suppression seal on him. Naruto fell to the ground, panting, but before the Cloud Nin could tie him up, he suddenly reversed his own kunai, and stabbed himself in the throat. He died almost immediately. Kakashi picked Naruto up, and motioned for Sasuke to do the same for Yugito. Over the walls, Sasuke nodded, hoisting Yugito on his back. They managed to escape, singed, but mostly unharmed. They ran at top speed through the treetops, and were able to make it over the border before nightfall. Kakashi sighed. I suppose it's fortunate for us that the land of lightning is right next to the land of conveniently located shelter. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, and Kakashi pointed to a nearby tree. This country is famous for its trees, whose roots raise them off of the ground, creating a space underneath large enough to sleep in. If we find a large enough one, we can all fit. Sasuke pointed. Look, a conveniently located shelter. Kakashi rolled his eyes, and turned to look at the forest giant Sasuke had pointed out. Naruto was carrying Yugito, having recovered shortly after Kakashi removed the suppressant seal. He carried her into the cave-like shelter, making sure not to jostle her any more than was absolutely necessary. Kakashi performed a basic medical jutsu to seal up the wound, and left the internal damage to her tenant. If she healed anywhere near as fast as Naruto, she'd be fine in a couple of days, even without medical help. Kakashi kept watch at the entrance, leaving his subordinates to catch up on their sleep. Sasuke and Hinata lay together against one side of the shelter, while Naruto leaned against the other, cradling Yugito's head in his lap. Stroking her hair gently, he passed away the midnight hours in silence. The next morning, they left the shelter early. Yugito protested feebly when Naruto picked her up, but he only tightened his grip on her legs. Silently, they leapt through the trees, heading for their home as fast as they could. They stopped to rest at around noon, and Yugito untied her headband, gouging a line across it with her kunai. Naruto nodded, and, picking her up again, moved out with the rest of his squad. They reached the hidden leaf just as the sun was setting. The guard raised an eyebrow at seeing Yugito, but, given the condition of the rest of Team 7, decided not to ask. Kakashi led them to the Hokage's tower. He was waiting for them, along with Jiraiya. He saw Yugito, and sighed. I suppose the treaty is void, now. It was not a question. Naruto let Yugito down, though she still leaned against him. The third turned to her. I take it you wish to live here, as a kunoichi of the leaf. Yugito nodded. Sarutobi sighed. The council will not like this. Well, on second thought, Danzo might. In any case, I cannot allow you into active service right away. Protocol, you understand. Yugito nodded. The third continued. If you will consent to let Inoichi Yamanaka, our head of intel, scan your memories, I can assign you as a fourth member of Team 7. Yugito nodded vigorously. Jiraiya snickered. Hey kid, if this keeps up, you might be the inspiration for my next novel. Naruto turned beet red, and said, I'm sure mom will love that. Jiraiya paled. On second thought, maybe not. Sasuke laughed, Hinata blushed, and Yugito simply stood there, a puzzled expression on her face. Huh, Naruto smiled, and said, I'll tell you later. Sarutobi smiled gently. Now, then, there is the question of where you will live. Naruto grinned. If you wanna stay with us, there's plenty of space at our house. Sasuke smirked. Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. Naruto blushed. Yugito nodded. I'd like that. The Hokage handed her a small stack of forms. Very well. These are your registration forms. You can turn them in when you come for your examination. Yugito bowed deeply. Thank you, Lord Hokage. I am forever in your debt. He tipped his hat. I would suggest that you not reveal your condition openly. I do not know how the villagers will react, but it probably will not be in a favorable manner. Yugito's expression became puzzled. How did you? Jiraiya chuckled. I was following Team 7 on their mission. No offense, but given the Cloud's history with the Hyuga. He pointed a thumb at Hinata. Yugito nodded. Sarutobi dismissed them, and Naruto led Yugito to their house, followed closely by Sasuke. Yugito bit her lip, staring up at the enormous mansion before her. She knew that Naruto came from a major clan. The Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze, was famous throughout all of the elemental nations. However, knowing was one thing, and seeing, right in front of you, a house almost as big as the Raikage's tower, was quite another. I suspected that you were a Jinchuriki the day before I found out. In your sensei's excuse, he mentioned that you were the last of your clan. Was that another lie? Naruto winced, then shook his head. Yes, and no. I am the only child of the Yellow Flash, but I was adopted. Well, legally, I adopted her, but still. Yugito nodded. What's she like? Sasuke grinned. You're about to find out. With that, he unlocked the gate, and the three stepped through onto the grounds of Clan Namikaze. Yugito twitched as something tickled her nose. She tried to brush it off with her hand, only to have whatever it was curl around her arm. Sleepily, she opened her eyes, coming face to face with a red-eyed python. She raised an eyebrow, and the python its head to the side in confusion. Strange. Why was this girl not shrieking, or panicking in some other manner? She narrowed her eyes, and the snake decided that this was the perfect time to retreat before it got thrown out the window. She walked downstairs, smelling ramen. Anko was sitting at the table, comforting a very shaken python. Noticing Yugito, she quickly hid him behind her back, smiling at the Jinchuriki innocently. Naruto poked his head out from the kitchen, grinning. Morning Yugito. How'd ya sleep? Yugito smiled back. Fine, thanks. A few minutes later, Sasuke came down the stairs, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. Raising a hand in greeting, he plopped himself down at the table. Naruto set bowls of ramen down on the table. Yugito raised an eyebrow. You can cook. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Yup. Well, kinda. I heard old man Ichiraku talking about different ways to make ramen one day, so I decided to try it myself. I've been working on it for a while. He grinned, and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Yugito smiled at him, and picked up her chopsticks. Placing a bundle of noodles in her mouth, her eyes widened. Swallowing, she said, Naruto. This is incredibly good. Naruto blushed, and grinned. Thanks, Yugito-chan. Yugito blushed as well. Meanwhile, at the Hokage's tower, Kurenai bit her lip nervously, as her team entered the tower. She'd been considering asking for a C-rank mission, simply so they could get out of the village. She and Sakura needed to have a talk, and Kurenai had the feeling that this simply wouldn't happen within the hidden leaf. However, she wasn't entirely sure they were ready for one. While it was true that Sakura had been training herself into the ground, their teamwork was non-existent. Sakura would often punch Kiba for being, well, Kiba. She didn't know what to make of him. He almost always remained silent in their team meetings, though she could tell that he disapproved of the Pinket's treatment of his other teammate. Hopefully she could get a relatively easy one. Some were ranked as such simply because they required ninja to leave the village. Tentatively, she knocked on the third's door. Sarutobi looked up from his paperwork. Come in, Kurenai. She opened the door, and motioned for Shino to close it. The Hokage steepled his fingers. I'm afraid, Kurenai-san, that I have no more D-rank missions for you today. When Kurenai didn't move, he sighed. I suppose there is something else you wish to ask. She nodded. Hokage-sama, I would like to request a C-ranked mission. Kiba punched the air. Sakura, eyes hardened, and Shino simply looked at Sakura before nodding. The third looked to Iruka, who handed him the mission scroll labeled, C. Very well. If I remember correctly, there is a mission in here that should suit you perfectly. He looked to Iruka again. Send in the bridge builder, please. In walked an old man, his spiky gray hair bound by a simple rope. He reeked of booze, and was gesticulating wildly with the bottle of sake in his hand. Kiba had to hold his nose. Akamaru, not having hands, puked. He pointed at the three genin. You sure these three are ninja? They look like a bunch of brats to me. Especially the one with the pink hair. Simultaneously, Shino and Kiba raised their arms to hold Sakura back. Kurenai glared at Tazuna. I assure you, my students are more than capable of dealing with any bandits we may encounter. Even if, by chance we should meet an enemy they cannot defeat, I am a Jonin, a ninja elite. He shrugged. Whatever. Meet me at the gates in an hour. Team 8 exited, Sakura mumbling curses under her breath. Sakura walked down the street slowly, a blank expression on her face. She knew that she should probably be packing, but she couldn't leave the village without at least one glimpse of him. She fought down her tears, telling herself, Kunoichi, don't cry. Quote. It helped, but only a little. She headed towards Ichiraku's, hoping to find him there. Finally, the red and white banner came into view, and she lifted a flap. Sure enough, Naruto was there, but who was that with him? Sitting down, she ordered herself a bowl of diet ramen. Naruto looked over at her, his face flickering with the briefest hint of discomfort. Hello, Sakura. She nodded, not trusting her mouth. Yugito peered at her from behind Naruto. Who's this? Naruto shrugged. She's an old classmate of mine. Yugito smiled at Sakura. Nice to meet you. I'm Yugito ni. Sakura nodded. Sakura Haruno. Sakura's eyes widened as she noticed Yugito's headband. Naruto. You brought a missing nin into the village. What were you thinking? At this point, Sakura was off of her stool, glaring at Yugito. Naruto's eyes hardened. Sakura. Sit down. Sakura was almost hyperventilating. But you. She. Missing nin. Naruto glared at her. Sit. Reluctantly, she sat down. Our last mission was to assist her in guarding our client, an envoy from Cloud. When we reached the village, he betrayed us, and Yugito decided to help us, and defect to Leaf. Sakura raised an eyebrow. But why would she? Naruto floundered, trying to think up a plausible excuse, when Yugito declared, because I love him. Naruto's jaw dropped, and Sakura simply sat there, a look of utter desolation on her face. Getting up quickly, she ran from the stall, tears running down her face. Back at Ichiraku's, for 5 solid minutes, Naruto simply sat there, gaping. Finally, Yugito got tired of it, and pulled him in, crushing his lips with hers. Eventually, they separated, both blushing madly. I love you too, Yugito-chan. She stood up. Come on, we should go. I kinda feel bad, making her cry like that. Did she have her sights on you, or something? Naruto shuddered. Fangirl. Yugito raised an eyebrow, then sighed. I'll go talk to her, make sure she doesn't do something stupid. I'll see you later. She winked at him, and he nearly collapsed. Quickly, she ran off, leaving Naruto standing outside the stand, still red as a tomato. Yugito ground her teeth in frustration. What do you mean? She left. Azumo sighed. Her team is on a C-rank mission, and they left about 5 minutes ago. Yugito facepalmed. Great. Just great. She sighed. Well, I guess that I just have to hope that her sensei can handle it. Yugito walked away, thinking. The girls must have known she was being followed, but how did she hide so well? For crying out loud, her hair was neon pink. If it weren't for the Nibi augmenting her sense of smell, she wouldn't even have gotten as far as she did. Yugito shook her head. It was out of her hands. Now, where to find Naruto-kun? Grinning ferally, she sped off across the rooftops. With Team 8, Kurenai was starting to get worried. They were almost halfway to Wave, and with the exception of a yip every now and then from Akamaru, and Kiba's replies, their group was entirely silent. The one who worried her the most, however, was Sakura. Throughout the trip, her face had been carefully blank. Kurenai could tell that she was hiding something. Every now and then, her mask would slip, and her eyes would turn hollow. Almost as if a piece of her soul were missing. Kurenai resolved to have a talk with the girl as soon as they got to the bridge builder's house. The demon brothers smirked. All was going according to plan. Just a few more seconds, and now, Kiba shouted a warning as two gauntleted Chunin leapt out of a puddle of water. Not wasting any time, Kurenai began weaving hand seals for a genjutsu, and Shino released his bugs. Quickly, the demon brothers wrapped their chain around Kurenai, attempting to slice her in half. With a small poof, she switched with a nearby log, causing a tree branch to fall on Maizu's head. Cursing, he leapt out of the way of a kunai, attempting to rush Tazuna, by a tree growing up around his legs, and then the rest of his body stopped him short. He felt a sharp impact to the back of his head, and knew no more. Gozu, seeing his brother fall so quickly, fled. Kurenai tied Maizu to a tree, and then turned to Tazuna, her expression furious. Remind me, what rank of mission did you apply for? You could have gotten my teamed. Tazuna raised his hands in apology. I had no choice. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Explain. Tazuna sighed, and began recounting the story of Wave, and its recent takeover by Gato. Predictably, Kiba immediately spoke up. All right, time for some real action. Kurenai frowned at him sternly. While his cause is just, you are not yet ready to take on a mission of this caliber. We should retreat to Leaf. Tazuna-san can get a refund there. Tazuna hung his head. I know I lied, but Wave needs this. If this bridge doesn't get built, we can never escape from Gato's clutches. Surprisingly, it was Sakura who spoke next. Kurenai-sensei, can we at least try to complete the mission? Surely, something like this would boost the Hidden Leaf's reputation. Looking at the girl, Kurenai remembered the reason she'd requested AC rank. She sighed, and hoped she wouldn't regret what she was about to say. Alright, Kurenai had been tense, ever since the demon brothers attacked. Currently, they were on a boat, rowed by a nervous-looking villager. At one point in the trip, Tazuna had thanked her for allowing them to continue the mission. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Save it for someone who cares. We will carry out this mission for the honor of the Hidden Leaf, but I assure you, should anything happen to one of my students, I will trap you in a permanent genjutsu that will make being castrated feel like a warm hug. Tazuna paled after this, and shut up. Kiba sniffed the air suspiciously. They'd been walking down the path for a few minutes, and he was beginning to pick up on an odd scent. It smelled like old blood, and perfume. He kicked a rock at Kurenai's foot to get her attention, at the same time scratching his nose with 2 fingers. Kurenai winked at him, and turned her head back around. Suddenly, he heard an odd whistling noise. Realizing what it was, Kiba shouted, "Everybody down!" Quickly, Shino pulled Tazuna to the ground, and everyone else ducked as well. A giant Zanbeitu whistled over their heads, embedding itself into a nearby tree. A tall, shirtless man appeared on top of the handle, and they could see, through the bandages he wore wrapped around his face, a large smirk. Well, kiddies, looks like your luck just ran out. You may have beaten the demon brothers, but there's no way in hell you'll be able to take me out. Kurenai's eyes widened as she finally recognized the overlarge sword upon which the man was standing. Zabuza Momochi, one of the 7 swordsmen of the Hidden Mist. Zabuza gave a short bow. I'm honored. Now, if you hand over the bridge builder, I won't have to you. Kurenai's eyes narrowed. Not a chance. Zabuza sighed. Of course not. Oh, well, in Zabuza's mind, a plan was hatching. He knew he could beat these Leaf Nin, that wasn't what bothered him. No, what bothered him is that Gedu had agreed to his price with no hesitation. The only logical explanation for this was that Gedu was not intending to pay him. He'd have to have a backup plan, just in case, and that pink-haired Genin looked like she'd do perfectly. Capture her, and offer her to Gato as a gift. If he made it look like her chakra was suppressed with a seal, then Gedu would let his guard down, and when he tried to use her, she'd him. It was genius. The only problem would be to capture her withouting her, but then again, that's what Haku did best. Kurenai shouted, "Stay back," and began a series of hand seals. Zabuza was much more powerful than she was, and she knew it. If she was to have any hope of surviving this fight, she needed to pull out the big guns. Forming the last hand seal, she whispered, "Tree binding death." Zabuza's eyes widened as he felt vines encircling his waist, and then he smirked. Biting down on his lip, he dispelled the illusion with ease. A genjutsu specialist, This'll be easier than I thought. Inwardly, Kurenai cursed. Damn it, that was one of my best techniques, this guy is tough. She only had one option left. If this didn't work, as fast as she could, she began forming more hand seals. Right before she reached the final seal, the Zabuza before her smirked, and dissolved into water. She felt a sharp pain in her neck, and knew no more. Kiba stared in shock as his sensei collapsed, her head rolling away from her body. Sakura's eyes were wide, and even Shino was visibly upset. Before any of them could react, a pair of Senbon flew out from the treetops, catching Sakura in the neck. Swiftly decapitating Tazuna, Zabuza leapt away, carrying Sakura, and leaving behind 2 shell-shocked genin. Haku spared them a single backwards glance before following his master, his heart heavy. Sakura awoke in a dark room, her throat incredibly sore. She tried to rub her throat, only to find that her arms were bound to her bed. Tensing her legs, she could tell that they were tied as well. Confused, she shook her head, trying to remember why she was there. I remember walking out of Leaf, and then. Her eyes filled with tears as the details of her sensei's gory death came back to her. She felt sadness at her sensei's passing, frustration for the ease in which she'd been captured, but most of all, she felt guilty. These last few weeks, she'd been avoiding Kurenai at all costs, and she could see how it had hurt the woman. Now, she couldn't do anything about it. Closing her eyes, she attempted to gather her chakra. Every genin was taught that, if a non-conductive object was injected with enough chakra, it would dissolve. In the academy, it was one of the first things they were taught, after learning how to gather chakra. Concentrating, she began to flood the chains with her chakra, only to freeze as a needle poked at her still sore throat. A soft voice spoke out of the darkness. I would suggest that you not do that. I was assigned to guard you, and while I am here, you shall not escape. Sakura looked out the window, wondering if her sensei could see her now. She must look pathetic in Kurenai's eyes. True, Zabuza was a Junin, and Haku was presumably just as powerful, but surely she could have done something. Right, shaking her head, she realized the truth. No, she couldn't be, not as weak as she was. If she got out of this mess, she would never let this happen again. No matter what, she had to get stronger. For now, well, there wasn't a whole lot she could do. With her arms and legs bound, all she could do was think, or talk to Haku. He was pleasant enough, so long as she didn't ask about why she was there. She tried to get information out of him once, and he hadn't talked to her for another hour. The only reason she even knew he was still there was that he would feed her every now and then. At least she had a window. She could tell by watching the sky that it had been 3 days since she'd been captured. Idly, she wondered whether or not her teammates had survived. Kiba slammed his fist into a tree. Damn it. Tears leaked from his face. Kurenai-sensei. Shino shed a tear as well, looking over the marker they had made for their teacher. They'd found a storage scroll that had come loose when she fell, and sealed her body into it, so that they could bury her properly in the hidden leaf. For the first time in his life, Shino was lost. Until now, he'd relied on logic, and it had benefited him, but no amount of reasoning could explain this feeling. Kurenai-sensei had been closer to him than his own parents, helping him whenever he needed advice, teaching them new exercises, such as tree and water walking, and encouraging him to open up to his teammates. Now that she was gone, he didn't know what to do. Certainly, after a time, they would be reassigned, hopefully together, but no one could replace his first sensei. He whispered, "You will live in my memory until the day I die." He and Kiba bowed their heads, and then turned away from her grave. Shino started towards the hidden leaf, but stopped when he realized that Kiba wasn't following him. Instead, his teammate was headed towards town. Kiba stopped as he felt his teammate's hand on his shoulder. He shrugged it off. What's the first thing Kurenai-sensei taught us? The first lesson taught to any leaf genin. Shino sighed. While it's true that we were taught to never leave a teammate behind, going after 2 Junin is suicide. We would have no hope of rescuing her. Kiba growled in frustration. I know that. I don't care. Shino shook his head. She might even be out of the country by now. Any Junin worth the title would know how to erase their scent. Kiba punched another tree. Damn it. Shino sighed. I know how you feel, but if we are to have any hope of rescuing Sakura, we need reinforcements from the hidden leaf. Kiba growled, but turned around, following Shino home. You might have been a total bitch at times, but you're still my teammate, and I will rescue you, Sakura. Shino shook his head. No, Kiba, we will. Kiba nodded, and the genin leapt to the trees, headed for home. Sakura tensed as she heard the door open, and Zabuza entered the room. He looked to Haku. I take it she's healthy. Haku nodded. Physically, at least. Sakura glared at the man, and he chuckled. Stop it, girl. Haku could put out more ki before he was 8. She didn't waver. Still smirking, he said, I'll bet Gato is just gonna love you. Noting Sakura's reaction, he continued. See, you're gonna be his new plaything, unless you do as I say. Sakura narrowed her eyes. I'm not telling you anything about the hidden leaf. Zabuza laughed. No, child, I'm not after information. What I want is a little bit trickier. You see, I've gotten wind that Gato plans to betray me. So, I'm going to strike first. That's where you come in. Sakura growled. What makes you think I'll do anything for you, after what you did to Kurenai-sensei? Zabuza shook his head. You're telling me you'd rather be raped than take